So today's video is going to be all about long exposures. I'm going to go over what they are and how you would take one yourself. So I'm here in Ninh Binh, Vietnam, and as you can see, this landscape is just stunning. We've got all these nice big rock mountains, I guess you would call them, and then this nice kind of open water field right here. So this will be a perfect place to do a long exposure for sunset today. So I apologize if it's noisy here. There is a road kind of right behind me there, and all the scooters and cars are zipping by. And then kind of over that way, there's some sort of farm and also some hotels, which some people and some of the birds have been pretty noisy. So now a long exposure is pretty much any image shot with a shutter speed of 1/10 of a second or slower. Now long exposures pretty much always need to be put on a tripod, because when you shoot with lower than 1/10 of a second, you start to introduce camera shake, because you can only hold the camera so still without moving it at all, and that's when you need the tripod. Most long exposures for landscape photography are taken with a tripod because they can be up to minutes for an exposure. But yeah, that's when you see those pictures with the streaky clouds or the smooth, glossy water with a nice reflection, that's a long exposure. And now in order to do a long exposure, you do need movement. Otherwise, it really won't show up in camera. So popular things for landscape photography would be moving water or moving clouds. That's what here we have the water that's just kind of rippling a little bit in the image here. So a long exposure is going to smooth all that out. The same with the clouds. Now these aren't the best clouds. Normally you want kind of clouds by themselves. This is like pretty overcast, so you won't see too much motion in the clouds, but it will kind of eliminate all detail in the clouds. So using a long exposure will eliminate all the detail in the water as well as the clouds. Well, let's get set up and I'll kind of visually show you what I'm talking about. So now there are several things wait till the cars clear off. Now there are several things that you need when doing a long exposure. You need a nice sturdy tripod and also a DSLR that you can put in bulb mode and can manually adjust the shutter speed, aperture, and ISO. You need a ND filter. Now this is a 6-stop ND filter, and I would recommend using a 6-stop or a 10-stop ND filter. 10-stop ND filters can get pretty crazy and get you doing real long, like several minute exposures. And for the video today, I'm just gonna use a 6-stop just because it's a little bit easier to work with, because the longer the exposure, the more room for error. And then you also need a shutter release. This will help take images past a shutter speed of 30 seconds. Now when starting off taking a long exposure, you want to make sure your tripod's on a nice stable surface, because you might be doing a several minute exposure, so there's no room for it moving at all. Make sure it's nice and set up and ready to go before you even start shooting. So I've got my composition all set up here, and I'm going to go over that before I proceed with the long exposure. Now as you can see here, I've got this big kind of rock pillar kind of directly in my frame, and then right in front of that is this small island that's in the water right in front of me as well. And I'm being very careful with this composition, because if I zoom out, I'll get these green leaves in the foreground, which I really don't want. I want this to kind of be as simplistic of an image as possible, and this just kind of adds extra elements that I don't want in there. So I'm just zooming in almost all the way to 35 millimeter, because I am using my 16 to 35 wide angle lens. So I'm zooming in, just cutting all that out, because this image is a little bit off balance, because to the right the mountains are a lot bigger to the left in the background. But if you can see in the reflection, there's kind of some reflections on the left, and in the bottom left corner there, that tree reflects, which kind of helps balance out the image a little bit. But it's still a little bit right heavy, but I've tried to adjust it, moved it up, down, left and right, up and down the street here, and unfortunately that's the best I could do. So now I have the image all set here. So I'm going to take an image right now. I'm going to shoot at f8, 1/25 of a second, ISO 64. And I'm focusing just right on that island straight in front of me. and then I'll show you this shot. And if you look in this image, you can kind of see a little bit of detail in the water, and then a little bit of detail in the clouds as well. Now once you get to shooting with shutter speeds lower than like 20 to 30 seconds, your camera's meter gets inaccurate. Like right now, my camera meter is saying that it's way overexposed, when in reality, it's very underexposed. So I have to overexpose it. So I'm at f8, 30 seconds, and that's still being a little bit too dark. So now I'll have to move my camera to bulb mode. And then a lot of people also say to make sure you're covering your eyepiece when doing a long exposure, because this could let light in, ruining the shot. I always forget to do that, even though mine has a switch to cover it here. It has something built in, but I always forget to do it, and it really doesn't affect my images that much, or at least I don't think it does. So that is a good tip to kind of get in the habit of doing, especially if your camera has one built in to always do it. But if you forget, it's no big deal and it shouldn't ruin your shot. Then after every shot too, you want to make sure that you're checking focus. So play back your images, zoom in to about a couple 100% just to make sure it's sharp throughout, because it can look sharp, but just a little bit of motion blur could ruin a whole image. So now I'm shooting past 30 seconds, so I have to attach my remote shutter release. All right, here we go. And this is another thing, it dangles, and it could also catch the wind, causing it to introduce camera shake. But again, I haven't had any problems with it, and then I'll sometimes just rest it on my strap there so it's not free dangling. But all right, so now I have the shutter release on. Now I'm gonna take my filters off, because I have to figure out my base exposure. So the base exposure is just this exposure without any filters. So, being properly exposed, this scene here would be 1/2 of a second. Now there is a formula that I'll kind of put up on the screen right here that shows how to figure out exposure, and there's a lot of apps as well. So I'm going to use my exposure calculation app, and I said 1/2 of a second is my base shutter speed. I am using an ND64 filter, but I'm also using the 3-stop grad filter. Now, 3-stop grad filter, I kind of figured it all before, and it doesn't really block 3 stops of light from the image, so I'm just going to figure for 7 stops of light. So the base exposure being 1/2 of a second, 7 stops, that gives me 1 minute and 4 seconds for the exposure. So now I'm going to start the image. And then also the self timer starts with the remote shutter release as well. So I have to start the image, wait the 5 seconds until it actually starts, then I'll start my timer here. And then a lot of times with long exposures, it's just a guessing game. I've used the mathematical formula as well as a lot of the apps that figure it out for you, and a lot of times they're just wrong. So I always, rule of thumb is I'll usually always add about 10 seconds to whatever I figure, and then as it gets darker and as the exposure needs to be longer, I'll add more and more time on there. Because when you get into a minute of exposures or longer, a few seconds doesn't really change it that much. But it's always better to get an image overexposed than underexposed. All right, so I think the exposure is done. Let's see how it turned out. Now you can see with this image, almost all the detail is out of the water, and the clouds are really starting to streak across the sky. It kind of gives it a little bit of an ethereal look, and it really brings out the colors as well. So now we're getting some real nice light behind me, unfortunately not in my composition, and we're also getting some mist that's rolling in that looks like it might roll into my scene there, which is looking pretty nice. Now it is hard doing long exposures past a couple minutes, because as it gets darker you'll lose light, so it'll have to extend, especially working with so many minutes. But you pretty much only get one shot. Like where I'm at here in the tropics, a sunset will maybe only last 10 minutes, not even, for the best color. So when you're doing a long exposure of about 5 minutes, that means I'll only have about 2 opportunities to nail that image. And if I miss it, like miss focus or don't get a composition I like, if the shot gets ruined, then I won't get another chance at it. So I'm deciding to take another image with all the filters on there. This one's gonna be about a 6-minute exposure, just because it's getting dark so fast, so I think 6 minutes will be enough. I'm just guessing though, I really didn't do the base exposure because the light's happening so fast. I just wanted to start taking another picture. And normally I wouldn't do this. I wouldn't do another several minute exposure after one several minute exposure, because as you get later and the light's more dramatic, the odds of me missing this next shot are getting pretty good. especially since I didn't figure out the base exposure, I'm just guessing. And then you really need to be careful too when doing a long exposure not to bump your tripod. And then when you do get the remote shutter release to end it, you need to take it real slow, because again, any bumping of the tripod or the camera could introduce motion shake, causing you to ruin the image. So the sky is just absolutely exploding with color, and there is some in my scene as well. So if this shot does come out, it could be pretty nice. So it's actually been 6.5 minutes. Now I'm gonna stop the exposure. Let's see if it turned out. So that's all for this video. All the light is pretty much gone. That's the colors peaked for just a few minutes, so I was able to capture it briefly in this last exposure. So it was pretty nice. I'm pretty happy with the shots that I got. So that's pretty much what a long exposure is and how to take one. I was able to get some pretty nice shots this evening that were over 5 minutes, which worked out pretty great. So I hope you enjoyed the video and learned something. Thank you very much for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe, and I'll see you later.